Three things: a widescreen iPod with touch controls, a revolutionary mobile phone, and a breakthrough internet communications device. An iPod, a phone. Are you getting it? These are not three separate devices. This is one device. And we are calling it
What's up guys, Reese here, and today we're going to be asking the question, is the original iPhone still worth it in 2020? Now, this iPhone was initially released almost 14 years ago on the 29th of June 2007 for the two prices of $499 for a 4GB model and $599 for an 8GB model, but is it still worth it in 2020? Let's find out. Starting off with the specs, the original iPhone had the Samsung 32-bit RISC ARM CPU, which was underclocked at 412 MHz with 128 MB of memory and featured a 3.5-inch 320 by 480 display at 163 pixels per inch. It has a 1400 mAh battery, 850, 900, 1800 and 1900 MHz quad-band GSM, GPRS or Edge support, 802.11 Wi-Fi and Bluetooth 2.0. It initially shipped with iPhone OS 1.0 but maxes out at iOS 3.1.3, and yes, I do mean iPhone OS because it wasn't called iOS when it was initially released. As far as I/O, the iPhone has a 30-pin dock connector at the bottom which is used for charging and data transfers, along with a speaker and a microphone. Along the top there is a retracted headphone jack, so only Apple headphones would work with it, the SIM card tray and a power button. Along the left side of the phone you will find the volume rockers and a mute button. On the back you will find the camera, and along the front you will find the home button and the earpiece. The main selling point of the original iPhone was how easy it was to use. The massive multi-touch glass display is what really caught the public's attention about it, compared to all the other phones at the time which had plastic keyboards permanently built into them. Now I do just want to talk a little bit about the history of the original iPhone, so if you're not interested in this bit then I'd just say skip ahead to the main review. So before the iPhone came into the scene, it is estimated that there were around 22 million smartphones sold from companies such as Nokia and BlackBerry. Pretty much all of these phones had a plastic keyboard attached to them, which created an issue, as Steve Jobs said.
And what happens if you think of a great idea 6 months from now? You can't run around and add a button to these things, they're already shipped.
It may come as a surprise to you that the iPhone was largely dismissed by other CEOs at the time of its announcement. The then CEO of Microsoft, Steve Ballmer, said it had no chance of taking over the smartphone market, and many media outlets agreed with this view. A few weeks after the announcement of the iPhone, the famous Hello ad started airing, which featured scenes from movies of actors picking up the phone and saying hello, with an image of the iPhone at the end stating that it was coming in June. This helped create massive hype for the phone, not that it was really needed because there already was a lot of hype, but it helped to carry it along a bit. Then, when it got to the 29th of June and the iPhone was rolled out, many media outlets agreed that they understood where the hype was coming from and why everyone was so excited for months on end about this device.
Rich Stamiro with CNET TV in New York City at the Apple Store, where the iPhone is set to launch later today at 6 o'clock. Right now it's about 4:50 in the afternoon. Yesterday when we were here, there were about 19 people waiting in line for this phone. Today, as you can see, hundreds more.
In 2007, around 1.9 million units of the original iPhone sold, and they sold over 6 million when they stopped selling it a few years later. Compared today with the iPhone 11, 37.7 million units have been sold, so you may say the iPhone has taken off quite a bit since then. Now, moving on with the actual review. Starting off with general use, although it does have iOS 3.1.3, which means it does have the App Store on it, 99% of the apps are flat out not supported on this phone. And even the apps which are supported on it don't seem to want to download, presumably because of how old the version of the App Store is, so we can really only test the apps which are built into the phone. Starting off with messages, it runs very slowly. It does still send messages, but at an incredibly slow speed, and the fact that it has such a small keyboard is not ideal for typing on, and it has no emojis. The calendar runs well enough, you can add events, you can do everything you want to do in the calendar, but you can't sync it with iCloud, as iCloud wasn't a thing at this point. The Photos app massively lowers the quality of high resolution images when you zoom into them. As you can see here, it removes a ton of detail, presumably to keep up with that very old 320 by 480 display. It will not import video at all, and it is a very basic Photos app, so you can basically look at photos and swipe through them, that's it. The camera app is extremely slow. The shutter stays closed for a significant amount of time when taking pictures, and I'm going to speak about the actual images later on in a different section. Now here's one for people who used iOS back in the day when it used to come with a built-in YouTube app. Now, although it is very nostalgic, it is completely unsupported now and nothing will play on it whatsoever. Moving on to stocks, I'm not sure how many people actually use stocks anymore, but the server is outdated and will no longer update, so it renders it completely useless either way. The Maps app works surprisingly well. It's a bit slow at updating the map when you zoom in, but it is still very usable with today's standards, which came as a massive surprise to me. Although you can still go on the weather app, the server is outdated and will no longer update, so it renders itself completely useless no matter how you look at it. The voice recording app still works completely fine, but the microphone and speakers are lacking. The Notes app still works very well. As I said, you can't sync it with iCloud as it wasn't supported, and the screen is quite small for typing on it, but you can still get basic notes down if you're in a hurry. The Clock app still works very well, letting you get everything out of the app which you would want: a stopwatch, a timer, adding the general time. You can do everything you want to do within the Clock app. The calculator hasn't really changed much in the past 14 years, except for the fact it looks more plasticky now, so this app is still completely usable with today's standards. In settings, there are very limited things you can do as there wasn't that much built into the phone. It is a bit slow and very simple, as I said. Now, iTunes does technically run, but it won't download any songs, I presume because the server is outdated. I'm not sure if this is just an issue for my personal phone or if this is a thing for everyone. If you do have an original iPhone and it does the same thing for you, please comment down below just so I know that it's not me, but this is my experience with iTunes. The App Store is the exact same. It will run and you can search for apps, but when you try and download them, it flat out is either not supported or won't download because the server is outdated. The Contacts app serves its purpose very well and it keeps up with today's standard. You can go through, look at your contacts, add images, add second numbers and emails, so stays up pretty well with today's standards. The Phone app still works very well. The quality of the calls is fairly decent, except for the fact that the loudspeakers are very old and sound sort of tinny, so you'll get an example of this now.
Hi, how are you? My name is Callie, and I have a dog. Thanks for listening.
Alright, bye.
Bye.
Hello, this is what audio calls sound like coming from the iPhone 2G. So as you can tell, it's quite quiet and muffled.
The Mail app would not let me sign in to test it at all because all the servers are outdated and therefore won't receive mail whatsoever. Now when it comes to Safari, it does still work, but the old Wi-Fi antennas are extremely slow, making it take forever to build simple websites such as Google. And finally, the iPod app. The only way I could get music onto this was to sync it from my computer. It would not sync music videos or movies because the codec is outdated. And as I said before, the speakers are very bad. So if you are planning on doing this, use headphones. Now moving on to the camera, so the original iPhone shipped with a 2 megapixel sensor, which I think that in itself can give you a pretty good idea of how bad the images are going to be, but I'm going to throw out some examples anyway, so let's get into it. Daylight images are barely passable, most are grainy and the colors are completely off, even with the most light getting into the sensor as possible. And low light images are even worse, as can be expected, as the sensor is so small, so there's very little light getting in there at all, except for when the iPhone is directly pointed into a light source in a dark room, then the subject doesn't look as bad. And as for video, the original iPhone does not support video whatsoever, so there is no way of me testing this. Actually, there is a way I can test this. There's software called White Door, which gives the iPhone the look and feel of iOS 7, but I wasn't able to get it to install, but I am told that that does add a video capability, but it is still very bad quality, as can be expected. Moving on to the battery, I was actually pretty surprised at how decent this battery is for a 14-year-old phone. In most cases, I'll get about 3 hours out of it, and I know you're saying, Jesus, Reese, only 3 hours, but for a 14-year-old lithium-ion battery, that is pretty good. If you are doing things like downloading apps and music on battery, it will go down faster. I mean, if you are able to download the apps and music, but that can be expected either way. And I do want to say it will vary from model to model. So let's say you got a model of a guy who used it every single day for 3 years straight. That battery is going to be a lot more aged than the one that I have here. I suspect that whoever owned this, although it has got a fair amount of scuffing on it, didn't use it that often that the battery died, but used it enough for it to take a bit of a toll on it. So yeah, just keep that in mind when looking for them. Now moving on to speed, the general speed of this phone is very slow, as will come as a massive surprise, I'm sure, to all of you. Even doing the basic things like swiping around the home screen will lag from time to time because of that 412 megahertz CPU not being able to keep up, but it really is no surprise at all. Using the built-in apps, as I showed earlier, is also very slow, as it only has 128 megabytes of RAM to work with, so it'll fill that up pretty quickly, I'd imagine. And finally, moving on to how it has aged, the original iPhone was supported until February of 2010 with the release of iOS 4, giving it 4 years of solid support. In 2020, pretty much every app you can think of will not download due to the software being too old or the fact that the App Store won't download anything at all. Audio calls are pretty good on this end of the call, but on the other end, the audio sounds muffled because of these very old microphones, which are very outdated compared to today's standards. And texting is alright, it just takes a while to send them and can be pretty annoying to type as the screen is so small. Now, because these phones are considered collectible now, the cheapest I've seen them on eBay is 60 quid in awful condition. Generally, these do tend to go for hundreds of pounds, if not thousands, if you've got it in perfect condition. So for that reason alone, I would not recommend getting one of these at all with the idea of using it as a main phone. Now, I actually got very lucky with this phone as it is in relatively good condition. I know these sides are pretty scuffed up and the screen is a bit scuffed at the edges, but the condition of this is actually very good compared to all the other ones, and I managed to get this for 58 quid on bidding, and I've seen others in much worse condition than this go for hundreds, so I was very fortunate to get one that's fully working in not too bad condition for such a low price. And even if you could get it cheaply, like the 3G and the 3GS and the 4, I would not recommend this phone at all, even just for the basics of calling and text messaging, purely because of the fact that the Edge data support is, well, there is no support anymore. And texting, as I said before, is very hard to do on this tiny screen, and calling people just sounds awful on their end, so it's ultimately not worth it, even if it was affordable. However, if you are a collector like me, I would recommend trying to get a good deal on one of these and keeping them, because I suspect in 10 years time the price will have doubled if not tripled, so these are going to be worth a hell of a lot of money one day. They already are, but then I'm talking about in the future. It's going to be like how much the Macintosh is worth now. I suspect that's the direction these are going to go, so hang on to them if you've got them, try and get a good deal on them if you don't. So yeah, that is it for this video. If you enjoyed it, please don't forget to smash that like button, press subscribe, and click the little bell so you'll be notified whenever I upload, and leave a comment down below. So yeah, see you later. Bye.